Yeah, but I think it's also an interesting point, and not I don't want to get political. This is not what this is about at all.
Here we
However,
go.
that monologue.
It's about goddamn time.
Hey, welcome back to Shoot Punch Kick, the most violent podcast on the internet. All right, we're the nostalgic journey through 80s and early 90s action, horror, and sci-fi films. This is the place where we overthink and overanalyze the best and worst from the golden age of genre cinema, from blockbusters to B movies and everything in between. And on today's show, we're going to be discussing a cult film from back in the day that revolves around a secret organization in New Orleans that hunts men for sport. And only one man, a former military serviceman trained in martial arts, can stop them. And it's not Hard Target. No, today we're going to be talking about the 1986 canon film Avenging Force, starring Michael Dudikoff, Steve James, and directed by Sam Furstenberg. So first I want to welcome my co-hosts, Dash and
What's up, my
Carlos. How you
goons?
guys doing?
What's going on, boys?
Doing well. Telly, how's everything going, guys?
It's moving along. I'm not even sure what episode we're on now, so that's a good sign that we're just kind of in our flow, right?
Yeah.
So today we're going to be doing a film that I don't think any of us have ever seen from beginning to end. So this was a first time watch for us. But before we kick off the discussion, want to just provide a plot synopsis via ChatGPT. And
Let's see how good it did this time.
Yes, I was
It wasn't
intrigued
so
by
good
the
last
little
time.
minor mistakes that happened on the Lost Boys episode. So here we go.
It's just going to give you the plot for Hard Target. Don't worry.
Yeah, so
it's gonna mention Van Damme.
Yeah, so here's ChatGPT's synopsis of Avenging Force. In the 1986 action thriller Avenging Force, the story follows a former Secret Service agent, Matt Hunter, portrayed by Michael Dudikoff, who finds himself drawn into a web of conspiracy and violence in the heart of Louisiana. When a series of brutal murders targets members of a local community, Hunter discovers that a clandestine paramilitary organization known as the Pentangle is behind the bloodshed. As Hunter delves deeper into the mystery, he uncovers a sinister plot orchestrated by the Pentangle, aiming to seize power and manipulate the government. With the help of his friend Larry Richards, portrayed by Steve James, a martial arts expert, Hunter sets out to dismantle the Pentangle and bring justice to those responsible for the atrocities. The film escalates into a high-stakes game of cat and mouse as Hunter confronts the Pentangle's ruthless leader, John Eagle, portrayed by John P. Ryan, and his army of mercenaries. Fueled by a desire for vengeance and driven by a sense of duty, Hunter engages in a relentless pursuit, navigating through treacherous landscapes and deadly encounters. Avenging Force explores themes of corruption, power, and the struggle for justice in a world where the line between good and evil is often blurred. Packed with intense action sequences, suspenseful moments, and gripping performances, the film delivers a thrilling ride from start to finish.
Not bad. That's pretty
Yeah,
good.
it was definitely better than what it came out with on our last show.
Yeah, the only notable mistake that I noticed there is because I remember the villain having a strange last name, and I'm looking it up right now, and his name was Elliot Glastonbury. And
yeah, I was gonna say that name.
Yeah,
Eagle.
Yes.
I was like, that was news to me. I feel like I would have latched onto that.
Speaking of which, also the Dudikoff's character's name is Hunter,
exactly,
which I think is pretty, which I thought was pretty awesome.
Yeah, but so just going back to ChatGPT listed the villain's name as John Eagle as opposed to Elliot Glastonbury. So that's a strange mistake, but the actor's name is John P. Ryan, so maybe that had something to do with it.
You know what though? That is such an awesome name. Like I kind of do.
Yeah, it is kind of dope.
His name was John Eagle, or at least we get a movie that's just like John Eagle this summer.
Hey, that's like a book series. That's gonna be the next. What is it? Oh God, John Reacher. Okay, so let's get into it, guys. Let's talk about our personal histories with the film. And I mentioned this was the first time watch, but I'm just curious if any of you guys heard of the movie or heard about the movie over the years, because this came out quite some time ago.
My history goes back to last episode where you were like, hey, you should watch Avenging Force. So I have a history of it for about a week now.
Oh, great, Carlos.
Yeah. So for me, I am a huge fan of the American Ninja franchise. So I'm very familiar with the major players, and I remember the box art. Um,
Yes.
just kind of. I think it affected you more. I'm sure you'll talk about it in a minute, but I do. When you mentioned this movie and I looked it up, I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember seeing that in the video store and knowing at the time that it was probably a part of those group of films. But I never. It's just one that I never got to watch. I never got around to seeing.
Yeah, for me, this was always on TV on Channel 11 in New York back in the day because they used to play
Really,
all the Canon movies all the time. It would be on Saturdays,
really.
weekdays, whenever. And I remember my sister renting it when I was young, and I saw like a couple of scenes, and the gimp mask just scared the shit out of me, and I didn't want I don't want to watch this. Not just the mask, but the whole character. I'm like, I can't watch this. But I remember seeing it in the video store a lot, like when Suncoast Video was a thing, and remembering the poster art and just seeing the box cover. It looked awesome. And then also gave me this, when you see like a movie poster and just like you have this movie instantly play in your head.
In your
And
head,
I imagine
yeah.
it was just like some kind of like Dirty Dozen sort of like revenge movie. And the title of the movie is just, to me, is like one of the best action titles in the world. It just sounds awesome, even
So
though it has really not much to do with the movie, but it's just an
That
It
awesome
was
does.
title.
that was gonna be my question. So yeah, it does have an awesome naming, sounding title for a movie. But when I was watching the movie, one thing that definitely occurred to me was like, this has absolutely nothing to do with this movie. Like, who is the Force and what is he avenging? Right.
Yeah.
So you could say Dudikoff, I guess, is the Force, but is one person a Force? I guess when you're Michael Dudikoff, it can be. But like, also, what is he avenging? Because he doesn't really avenge anything until the end of like the very last act of the film.
Unless
Um,
unless Pentangle is the Force
Yeah,
and he's avenging that.
yeah, who knows? But it's an awesome title. Like it's just,
it
to
is a
me,
great
that's
title.
one of the like
It
the
is a
best
great
action
title.
movie titles. It's the most action movie title that I can imagine in the from back in the day. So yeah, so I'm just glad I finally got a chance to see it. So in terms of the film itself, it was produced and distributed by Canon Films, which, if you're of a certain age, that was sort of your go-to in the 80s for low budget action movies that just lowbrow, high concept movies with ninjas or breakdancing or whatever. And
I love
originally it
that
was
logo.
intended. Yeah, exactly. That logo is
The
iconic.
logo.
And the
Mhm.
film was originally intended to be a sequel to a Chuck Norris movie, Invasion USA. And in fact, the main characters share the same name. So I wonder if the Hunter thing, given this is about, this is basically an adaptation of the Most Dangerous Game, if that's just a coincidence, funny coincidence. And this reteams the director and stars of American Ninja, as Carlos, you were alluding to. And this was the film they made right after the first American Ninja movie. So Michael Dudikoff and Steve James reteaming again as two buddies, and Sam Furstenberg coming in to direct again. This film, the production happened right before the production of American Ninja 2. And then it was also shot on location in New Orleans for a budget of $4 million, and it ended up grossing a whopping 4.7 million at the global box office. But back in the day, though, these movies didn't get the wide releases as they do now, generally speaking. But they made a lot of money on VHS and also on TV. So I think that's what fueled a lot of Canon films back in the day.
I think I want to just talk for a second, if I can, about the budget itself. I think that oftentimes throughout this movie, I was hit in the face by the budget. Right. I think at one point I was really impressed with the scene in Mardi Gras because it looked like legitimately they were filming during Mardi Gras. The amount of people, right, and the
Mhm.
costumes and the sets, and so I imagine that couldn't have been easy or cheap. And then conversely, you think about like this is supposed to be the head of, I don't know if it's the Secret Service or something, but it's literally just like four guys in a closet somewhere standing around what looks like a map.
Yeah, I actually listened to the director's commentary, which came out originally like 10 years ago, so it's 10 years old or so. But yeah, they talked that Mardi Gras scene was something they actually staged. So it wasn't like I
Oh,
thought
really?
initially they stole the footage or something, but yeah, this actually
That's
and
good
they
work.
kind of they figured out some way to get around that. But yeah, they actually filmed that, and they did joke that they spent all the money on that scene.
Did
I
So
think it's really the pacing of it was like generally that would be your end, right? Like you want to end on your
yeah,
biggest set piece. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, like they set like a bar early because I was with you with that where I watched it and I was like, holy shit, like this is a pretty big scene. But you know, it reminded me of kind of like a Strange Days where, you know, you have
hmm
the end where it's like, you know, New Year's and you like, you know, so many extras and like, you know, areas around it. And then after that, it was like, yeah, let's just go to this
yeah.
abandoned
That
warehouse.
was a very common thing. So who knows what the actual truth is, but that was a common thing with Canon films back in the day. They'd have to cut their budgets like midway through production, and the films would just kind of
Ah.
abruptly end. And that's what I suspected as well, that they just kind of ran out of money at the end. But let's
I
go
like that
to
set that. Okay.
sorry.
I was just gonna say I like that set also where they had the event by the docks.
Yeah.
Even though I think that scene was completely ridiculous, I think it was a really cool just set piece place for them to be fucking around in. But yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
One more thing with the production.
Mhm.
I don't know the last time I've been so aware of like mannequins and dummies. So like at the Mardi Gras, there's like a part where they because and the problem is they draw attention to it. So there's like a part where these two black women are like grabbing their babies from the
Uh huh.
stroller, and it's like you can clearly see that they're dolls, and like with
Uh
the
huh.
fire scenes, and especially, and we'll talk about during one of the deaths where someone flies off a roof and
Yes, I
there's
love
just
that
like
scene.
It's all
no
right.
mistaking it. And I don't know, like a lot of these things I just really found charming.
Yeah. No, for sure. And let's talk about the cast and the performances. So obviously, this is a reteaming of Dudikoff and Steve James. We were saying Michael Dudikoff. For those that grew up at that time, he was sort of one of the guys that had a very bright but brief moment in the action zeitgeist doing the American Ninja movies. And then he kind of ended up doing straight to video stuff for the next like 10, 12 years, and before he retired and kind of came back. And then I think another actor worth mentioning is obviously the villain, John P. Ryan, who was also a
Great.
villain
I
in a
think it's
whole
really
bunch
good.
of low budget action films and genre films during that period. But curious to hear what you guys thought of the performances, and maybe starting with Dash, since you're not a Michael, you're not a Dudikoff head.
I mean, it's tough to think about the performance, just performances based on because I kept thinking about what I thought this movie was going to be because I didn't, you know, went in completely blind. So right from the beginning, it felt like, oh, this is going to be like a surviving the game kind of like, you know, the whole movie set in the swamp kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So I kept
Look
having
at
these
that.
like false starts where, like, to me, for the first like half hour, I was like, yo, this is an awesome buddy film
Mhm.
between Steve James and Dudikoff. And I thought like everything just felt like what this podcast is, what the genre is, like they're just hitting all of the notes. But for what they were trying to do, what this movie is, and what the vibes of the types of action movies I like, I thought it was really on point.
Yeah.
The performances.
Carlos?
Uh, so yeah, I feel like there are in both directions in this movie some really great things and some really terrible things. I didn't think that Dudikoff and Steve James were particularly good, but also the dialogue wasn't given to them didn't lend to like really great. Some of the dialogue is like really bad. I feel
Yeah.
like, um, but again, like you said, like in a charming way though. It kind of feels like dialogue that we would have written at the time.
Mhm.
I thought that the sister characters was like really bad. Like I just found it difficult to watch.
Yeah, apparently
Like
she was dubbed over because her voice
oh, is
was
that
too
right?
low. So they got like basically an adult woman to do her voice.
Yeah, I knew something was off. Okay, so that actually makes a lot of sense now. However, I will say I absolutely love John P. Ryan in this role as the villain. I think he sold it. He was doing these really weird screams during some of the battles, which is like off-putting, but also lended to the crazy. But my favorite non-verbal acting thing for him that I love is in the scene when they are at the shooting range
Mhm.
And one guy, the first guy shoots, and he does the really bad overreaction from the, right? And then there's another guy who's like pretty tactical with it. But when you get to John P. Ryan, he's shooting with
Like
one
from
hand
the
on his
hip.
belt
From the
and one
shooting from the
hand.
hip, literally. Yes.
Yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I'm saying? And like, just I don't know. I don't know if that was something that was scripted or directed. It just seems like something that an actor like in the
Yeah.
character would come up with in that
That was a
moment. And I
choice,
think,
you're saying.
yeah, yeah, and so I really dig that. And then I just want to give a quick shout out to Mark Alimo. You might recognize him, Dash, from Total Recall.
Oh shit.
He was the guy with the mask and the sword. He was the
Oh,
the one
Yeah,
of
who was
them
me? Who
that,
was me in Total Recall?
okay.
he was Richter's like
They're all
lackey.
connected.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my god.
He's like, oh, I bet you he's having. I bet he's the one who was telling him like, oh, I'm sure
With the
he
spiky
hated.
hair, the way I would want Quaid.
No, he had a beret. He was
Oh yeah,
the
yeah. So he is the all they're all connected
they're
guy.
all connected. Yeah, yeah.
Oh
So
man,
he
I
was
didn't
in that,
recognize him.
and he's also a major character in Star Trek that I like. He's a major villain in Deep Space Nine throughout the whole run of the show.
Okay. Well, there's
Um,
several Star Trek connections within this films that we'll get to later. But for me,
Okay.
I thought, yeah, John P. Ryan was a standout, and you could always tell when an actor is kind of bringing something unique to the character, because this was a stock sort of evil guy who wants to take over the world, but he kind of brings enough quirkiness to it, but also intensity, because that monologue was unbelievable, and we'll get to that a bit in a little bit when we talk about the script. But fun fact, Kane Hodder is in this film, and he played Jason from the Friday the 13th, 7th and on to
mm.
before Jason versus Freddy versus Jason, and he played one of the henchmen that did the that attacked the house and burned down the
Oh,
house.
okay.
So I thought that was pretty neat. 80s
Oh,
connection
yeah, I
there.
thought it was only the four of them that attacked the house, which I thought was like kind of odd too.
I think there were some other dudes that were like throwing gasoline into the house or things.
Oh, I just
maybe
assumed
he
it was them.
or maybe he was, or the
The
people
guarding it,
protecting
one of the
them.
ones.
Yeah, maybe he was one of the guards. Yeah, yeah.
Yo, that's all right. We'll get to
Yeah.
it.
So,
That was awesome. I fucking love
all
it.
right. I was alluding to that a second ago, but let's talk about the script. So what's interesting about this script is that it was actually written by one of the co-stars of the film, who played the head of the intelligence agency that Dudikoff was reporting to, and his name is James Booth, and he's a British actor known for his role in Zulu, a movie that I've never seen, but I guess that was pretty big at the time. And he also wrote American Ninja 2 and 4. So for me, I just thought this was a great example. This script was a great example of really a missed opportunity, because I thought the most interesting part of the movie was the pentangle. And
Yeah.
originally I thought, like, if we could do like a SPK rewrite, I thought they were going to have Michael Dudikoff kind of infiltrate them and kind of understand how it's working and how it's sort of, permeating across society and everything. But I thought there was such a great idea there that was let down by the execution. And maybe if they got another writer to kind of redo it a little bit, or spent a little bit more time, or kind of reimagined it more, because at the end of the day, this was sort of the most dangerous game. But that was also just like the bookends to the movie. That wasn't even played a role in the plot throughout the film. But what did you guys think?
I mean, I feel like that could have been the sequel, right? Like the movie didn't end on a definitive end. It was very like, is the who I guess is now the writer, right? Like, is he the fifth pentangle? It leaves this mystery kind of open. I was surprised, like generally a lot of the movies that we've been picking or watching like from this time are pretty like 90 minutes or sometimes under. So I was a little shocked to see this almost at 2 hours as is. So with like, the addition of some of the like pentangle lore and world building, I mean, we're talking about a probably, 2 hour and 15-minute canon film, which I don't know how that would have played out.
Yeah, those
but
would have been impossible, because they wanted their films nice and short so they could have extra showings during the day.
Yeah, but I think like, in terms of a part 2 and diving into that, I think that would have been really cool, because whenever a movie introduces an idea that's more interesting than the movie, you're like, oh man, just do that. So they do talk about exactly what you're talking about. And once I said that, I was like, oh shit, I do kind of want to see that instead of what we got. So it definitely was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, Carlos?
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly about the most important thing in the script being Pentangle. Um, I also thought that there were some odd things that they picked up but didn't really follow along with. Like I didn't really understand why the point of having the whole backstory with Michael Dudikoff's parents getting killed, and
Mhm.
that actually being his sister instead of possibly being just his daughter.
Mhm.
And they kind of alluded to it in the very beginning scene where the grandpa, they're at the ranch and he's like, oh, man, her parents, dad, mom and dad would have loved to see them. Oh, you can't blame yourself for that. And again, I think this kind of goes back to the conversation we had in episode 0, where um, movies today would have given us a whole flashback, and it would have tied into somehow it being a redemption. And so I'm marking it as a negative because it felt like it didn't go anywhere. But at the same time, I feel like that's just as a result of what we've become accustomed to, the same thing that we were rolling against and some of the things that we wrote. Um, and I don't know. I think again, this movie just kind of screams to me of the script that we would have written at the time. I think there's just some silly bits to the plot, like okay, they shot my son. I got to handle this myself.
That
But
was
I had to handle it myself. I don't have a gun. Do you have a gun? Don't worry, we'll just improvise. Like,
yeah, yeah.
so. And then he was like, he goes at the end of that scene in the factory or shipyard or whatever it was. He's like, yeah, you tell your friends at Pentangle they mess with the wrong ones. And he goes, hey, Bubba, like
Yeah,
he
yeah.
said, Bubba, like So I didn't love the script. Again, I appreciated it as a thing of its
Yes.
time, and it kind of enjoyed it as like this seems like the kind of thing I would have written at the time.
Yeah,
You know.
it's a big missed opportunity in terms of what really stood out in the screenplay and the story. And as I was watching this, I was thinking, yeah, this could have been a prequel to the Purge. This could have been sort of how the founding fathers started. But at the same time, I thought there was some. I mean, this was made in 1986, so like almost 40 years ago, and that monologue,
It's crazy.
you could
It's
take
spooky,
that
Could go
man.
right
monologue
today.
and put that into a white
Yeah.
nationalist or some other
And they mentioned gun
organization.
control. It was
Yeah,
like,
there's about like xenophobia, about guns, about loving
yeah.
America, and
Mexicans
all this
coming
kind of stuff.
up,
So
and
very relevant to kind of today in terms of what's going on, right? Which is kind of scary because I think on the flip side, there was a lot of the paranoia that it was in that speech. Some of that actually did come true with the drugs and everything and the crime
Yeah,
that's going on
but
right
I think
now.
that's also an interesting point, and not I don't want to get political. This is not what this is about at all.
here we
However,
go.
that monologue was representative of the bad guy, and everyone who watched that movie were like, those ideas are the bad guys. And to me, this sounds like in today's politics, just a regular rally of the party. I'm not going to name a party, but it sounds like a
Well,
rally at
yeah.
like a legitimate political rally, right? Like
Well,
it's
what would be
what was.
interesting for so again, not to get into politics, but those curious about, because I think this is almost a Rorschach test, the monologue, and if on YouTube that monologue is uploaded, and you'll see some interesting responses in the comment section.
Really?
So
Okay,
yeah,
that'd be interesting to take a look at for
yeah.
sure.
But
So
I think like some of it does, I guess, come from the 80s and the Central American part, right? So like
yeah,
a lot of it stems, not a lot of it, but some of it does stem from the idea of, I guess, what was going on with Central America and the Contras and stuff like that, which I think was like the 80s version of the Vietnam plot point.
yeah.
Or like now the Middle East plot points. So
Hmm.
some of that. But yeah, with that, I think that the interesting thing about the monologue, because going back to what you were saying, Carlos, they do kind of talk about why it's his sister, like, and the whole like backstory. Like some stuff is kind of weird. Like they talk about how his parents dying, they died
Is
because
what
of
got
him,
him out.
and
Did
that's
they?
why, yeah, because someone was trying to target him, and they killed his parents instead, and that's what caused him to
I missed
retire.
that.
But some
I
of the
know. Oh
stuff is
yeah.
weird because like for someone, they mention how young he is, but he's like a war vet, a retired, like everything
Yeah,
about
he was
him
in the Secret Service and he
screams
was at war.
old.
Yeah, he should be, given how young his sister is, maybe like in his 20s, but he's obviously not. So,
But he has
or
like
maybe
the
he's supposed to be.
backstory
Yeah,
of like an
right.
80
Yeah,
year
like a
old.
grizzled, like war
But
veteran.
the one thing though with the and getting back to the monologue, like some of that stuff is like I think it's like bookended, right? So it's like
Yeah.
here's this like middle piece that a lot of people would agree with, and I'm sure the 80s and now, but it's like right before it is like we're hunting humans, and then right after it is like when they spray paint this dude's house, it's the
A, it was at the
A
A. You called
and
the
the
A.
swastika. Like it's like both. They're like, look, we just want to cover all bases. We
Yeah.
are definitely white
No, and
supremacists.
but you notice the N bomb was with the A. It wasn't a hard R.
Yeah, yeah.
Which which leads me to
Yeah, I
believe
think
that
they
maybe
misspelled
the
it,
set
but
designers.
yeah.
Yeah,
But I think one thing that you pointed out I want to talk about too is the fact that this is sort of a riff off of The Most Dangerous Game, which, by the way, I didn't know this. It just that short story, which tons of movies have been based on. It's marked its 100th birthday this past January. And
yeah.
I think it's just remarkable. And I haven't looked into this, but the fact that this is a sort of a reworking of The Most Dangerous Game taking place in New Orleans. And then a couple of years later, you have Hard Target, which is essentially, The Most Dangerous Game, again, set in New Orleans. Very different movies, obviously, stylistically, plot-wise, but just an odd similarity. Okay, let's go into the direction. So as I mentioned, the director is Sam Furstenberg, who you might not know the name, but you'll definitely know the movies. He's a Polish-born Israeli director, known for directing really some of the iconic 80s B movies, including Revenge of the Ninja, Ninja 3, The Domination,
My
Breakin'
favorite.
2, Electric Boogaloo, the American Ninja movies. So yeah, I think it's, even if you don't know the name, you've seen his films. And I think a journeyman action director, entertained a lot of people back in those days, because I watched a number of those movies millions and millions of times on VHS tape and on TV.
Yeah, it's an impressive catalog.
Yeah, what do you think of the direction overall?
I think the pacing of it was some odd choices, like we talked about before. It crescendoed about a half hour in of once it gets to that area, there were some things that were just like not maximizing the positives and hiding the negatives. I mean, there were just like certain things that were done that draw attention to the limiting budget and resources that they had. So for example, the whole like bayou rain scene, you can't have artificial rain through the entire bayou. So it's a sunny day, it's pouring rain, and only like a little select area around their fight has like rippling water. So things like that, for example, were
Yeah,
just
and his
like,
clothes will go from soaking wet, and
To
then
dry.
5 seconds later they're completely dry. So, but apparently they spent like a significant amount of time filming that in the bayou, and they had to use rain machines. But it
yeah.
also sometimes rain for real, so the continuity is just kind of all messed up. It's, 1 second it's cloudy, another second it's sunny.
But I mean, even with that, like, maybe you would lean a camera higher so it's down and shows a more limited version of what we're seeing, as opposed to here's the entire bayou with 6% of it raining. Stuff like that. One thing that jumped out to me was Steve James just he keeps losing clothing. Like
He
there
took
was
his shirt off. His wife beater came off for no reason. You see him do it actually in the shot.
So
You see him do it.
they actually mentioned that in the director's commentary, that Furstenberg did with Dudikoff, and he was saying Steve James wanted to take his shirt off because he was
Oh.
saying, like, I put so much work into this body, I want to show it off.
You know what? I'm not mad. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not. Shit, had it been me, fair enough. Fair
It's
enough.
just
I'm not
wild 'cause
mad.
he goes back after the scene, just strolls up to the house, no shirt on, like
Uh,
the action was a little while ago. You could have
yeah.
redressed. So in terms of that, like a lot of the directing for the people's for the actors and stuff like that, I think left a lot to be desired. But again, it's like, do you judge it on cinema and creating cinema, or just
Hmm.
creating something that, like, I wouldn't say any of this is good, but like, I laughed when I watched it, and I think all of those things contributed to me having a good time watching it. And it's cheesy as hell, but that's what I liked about it. So
Hmm.
I was into the directing for how bad it was.
Did you notice the other thing that caught my attention is Dudikoff catches Arrow to the knee ostensibly, and then 24
Yes.
hours later he's walking without a limp. He just
Without
no limp. And then I think even later on at the end too, the main bad guy, whatever Hostenberg, whatever that main bad dude's name was, like catches a fucking Bowie knife to like his thigh, right when he was like rooting him in the water, and then I guess it's supposed to be the same day or later on that day when they have their final encounter in the mansion.
Mhm.
And again, no limp. You know what I'm
What did
saying?
you
I don't
think
know
about
what.
when Dudikoff pulled the arrow out of his leg? Because he pulls it out by the head and
Yes.
then
How
pulls it up, which shows the
It makes
feathers.
no
Like,
sense. So
got,
the
got
back
through his
end of
leg.
that arrow came through the entire leg. That must have hurt like a motherfucker. So
Yeah, man. Yeah. So
no,
for
they
the
recover very
directing,
quickly in this film because yeah, they get into fight scenes, they get thrown around, and then the next scene they're just running at full speed and ready to
yeah,
kick
like
ass. So
nothing.
Mhm.
So for the directing again, I think I mirror a lot of what Dash is saying. Um, it is very cheesy and some poor choices, but it's what made it fun and kind of what made it of the type of movie that it is. One thing I would like to give a shout out to is not so much the directing but the cinematography. I mean, again, there's just something about the style of filmmaking and cinematography from these movies where all of these shots just look really, there's the shots of Dudikoff kind of trying to climb around that seaport area, the wide shots in the bayou, um, even the kind of all of it just looked very filmic of the time and just kind of brought me back. So I really did love a lot of the cinematography, if not the direction so much.
yeah, I think the film is competently made. Obviously, on a low budget, and some things are just totally on the nose. Some of the scenes, but I think for what it is, it doesn't attempt to be high art or anything else. So it was a fun, a fun and efficiently directed film.
And I
Um,
like that some of the stuff, especially with the that area when they were by the docks, like, if they had a dude who could like swan dive off the top into the water, they
mhm.
were like, we're shooting that shit. And I think, like, the thing that I
We
like
will.
about these movies, from a directing point is, because of the limited budget, you're conscious of the making of it. And this movie looked like it was probably a fucking blast to have made, between delivering those, like, the amount of extras in that, like, that Mardi Gras scene. Like,
Mhm.
you could just imagine, like, some of the things that were happening in it were just hilarious. And it just seemed like it must have been a great, like, however long to put that
To
together, to
make
just
it.
show up on set and
Yeah,
work
for
on this.
sure. And going hand in hand is an action film, so we can't talk about directing without talking about the action and the stunts. So the stunt coordinator for this film is a man by the name of DJ Davis. No jokes, please. He has a career that spans 5 decades, and he's done everything from being a stuntman to being a stunt coordinator, and he's doubled for the likes of Michael Caine, Tom Hanks, Tommy Lee Jones, Jack Nicholson, and even Bruce Campbell. Some of his notable credits include As Good as It Gets, Army of Darkness, Universal Soldier, Darkman, and then one interesting thing that came up on his IMDb, uh, Playboy Video Centerfold, Playmate of the Year, Stacy Sanchez, in which he was the stunt coordinator. So
Mm.
that's I can't imagine what kind of stunts were involved in that. But he also has done some work on the Star Trek franchise,
I can,
doing some
I
work
can
on
think
Star Trek
of.
6 and also Next Generation and Deep Space Nine, Carlos, because I know you're a fan.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
overall,
yeah.
I thought some of the stunts were good, like the guy falling off the horse, and some of the practical work was good for what it is.
Mhm.
I can't remember anything truly like amazing or
Mind blowing.
outstanding, but it kind of But I think when you're watching those movies as a kid, you're just kind of imagining yourself like running around and kind of climbing up things and jumping off buildings, and it just seems like a lot of fun. But I think it did what it could do with the budget that it had.
No, and they like with the locations. I think there were some stuff. There was some good wrestling. I wanted to check to
Yeah,
see
the
if
ending. Yeah.
when they're in the bayou, there was like a
Mhm.
really good back to belly to back suplex. I mean, this is like real WWE level. And one of the things that I wanted to look at was to see if and it wasn't the case, if this occurred before or after Bane broke Batman's back, because when I was
He did
watching
the
that
back
Speaking of that
breaking.
scene,
too, I was watching that. Yeah.
yeah, it's like very the backbreaker stuff like that. But
The
yeah,
mask.
yeah, and I
Yeah, I can
think
see
in
that.
terms of with the stunts, that kept me drawn throughout, because again, at the beginning, I was totally on board for this movie to entirely take place in this bayou and be my reference for this with Hard Target is the Ice-T movie Surviving the Game,
Hmm.
which was like all in the jungle. And again, I went in blind, so I was like, from the first scene which takes place there, I was like, oh, we're gonna get that for 2 hours. So I think for the whole rest of the movie, every time that they weren't in there, I mean the house on fire had some pretty cool stunts in there, the whole like driving sequence, things like that going on. And then the fights were fun. The what I was unsure of until the end was they played it as the Pentangles whole thing was like a survival of the fittest, right? These are the four most badass warriors, but then they had like the one, remember the first guy, he was like
Yeah.
super weaselly, and you're like, this guy couldn't kick anyone's ass. But by the end, you're like, oh, okay, this dude can fight as well. Like, he was like, pick your weapon and shit like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, they drawn it out to the whole movie where like shit was going on. So
Yeah,
I
well,
had a
speaking
good
of
time with
the
that.
final fight, like what was very distracting, I don't know if you guys picked it up, was just the stunt doubling
Double.
for John P.
Yep.
Ryan, and his hair
Yeah.
color would change into
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
bad wig,
Yeah, yeah, no,
Um,
and also too for Dudikoff climbing in the Mardi Gras scene, climbing up the side of that building. The wig
mhm.
was just way off, and every time I saw it, and I was gonna make a snarky comment when you were talking about the stunt coordinator having body doubled, about how I saw it every single time he was in this movie too. Like,
Yeah. I mean,
um,
in Dudikoff's defense, he does do some of the roles, and you could see that's clearly him, and for the most part, in some of the action oriented scenes. Um, Although you could also clearly see it was a dummy that fell out of his hands when he was shot off the roof, which which was very funny. I just, that was like an unintentional laugh for me, but that's that's the part of the charm of these low budget films. Kind of
This
just like
movie had a lot
so
of rolling.
yeah.
yeah, well, so
Yes.
I was gonna
And
no,
unnecessary rolling most of the time.
I was reminded of the episode of The Office when they were trying to do parkour.
Yeah.
Just like walk to a quick
Yeah.
roll. So for me, the stunts again, kind of I'm of two minds. I'll start with the things that I really liked, which again included the guy getting shot through the motorcycle and the Mardi Gras.
Mhm.
Like that whole Mardi Gras scene was pretty on point. I really enjoyed a lot of that. Also, some real visceral stunts like or special effects, or I don't know how, but when they threw the grenade into the house, there was literally a shot with the dummies, right? But you could see the kitchen exploding, which was like a really visceral
Yeah.
thing. I also liked when Dudikoff was climbing up the stairs and the stairs fell out from underneath him from the fire.
Mhm.
I thought that was a really good stunt. Right before his buddy dies, again, famous last words: "Make sure my son doesn't die." 10 minutes before, 10 minutes. Make sure you save my son. He failed that fucking mission in the next 37 seconds.
Yeah.
But he did this cool thing where he like fell off the side because the stairs weren't there anymore. And the wrestling I thought was really dope. It's funny. So he kills one guy by kind of body slamming the dude onto like the tree.
Yeah, he got hit
yeah.
with the commando.
But like upside down, right? And
Yeah.
then the funny thing is, the very next scene, the other dude keeps body slamming Dudikoff right around the same kind of
Yeah.
stumps, and I'm just like, oh, every time he was gonna do
He
it.
didn't see what just happened to his boy.
Yeah,
So
for me, I thought that was one of the weakest sequences in the movie because it was just like being in the bayou for so long and fighting three people, and it was basically the same fight three times.
well, I mean,
Um,
again, this goes to the negative, right? The negative, the part that I didn't really like was necessarily the choreography.
mhm.
Because, I mean, again, and I have to go back. To be fair, I haven't watched the American Ninja movies in years, so maybe it's rose tinted glasses. But I remember there being some really dope martial arts choreography in those movies. Again, the thing with ninjas, they're doing backflips, they got swords and shit, so it's gonna look cool. But for this, it just felt like punch you, punch me, punch you, punch me, punch you, punch me. Oh no, you got me on the floor, you got me. Uh-oh, he got his second win. He's up now, and now he's punching. Again, I guess that kind of goes to the WWF, like Hulk Hogan just. He got to that point where you can't hit him. But I was really kind of disappointed in the choreography. But again, that might just be I was expecting a martial arts, just off the history of the main players. And so maybe that was my mistake because again, they don't necessarily say that these guys are martial artists anywhere in the film, right? Except for the kendo kind of thing. Right,
Yeah,
that
I mean,
happened,
they
which
do
I always think is
weapons
kind
and
of
stuff
funny
like
too.
that. But yeah, it was definitely not as stylized, and it was very typical of sort of American action movie fight scene. And a lot of the fight scenes and action scenes just reminded me of like a really good episode of the A Team sometimes. So
Yeah.
very serviceable, but not
We
not
didn't even get the back fist
remarkable.
punch.
Yeah.
At least if we would have got that.
They didn't really introduce the hand to hand stuff until like an hour and a half into the movie, because like that whole Mardi Gras scene, which we keep talking about, was all guns. There were like a whole, the motorcycle dudes, they're trying to speed away, gets shot in the chest, like all of those things. And when I talk about the action, typically that's the part that I'm talking about. Similarly with the house, and anytime there were just like droves of henchmen in there, and yeah, it definitely slowed it down, and just the amount of people that he fought in that bio definitely did
Also,
okay.
I was also going to just say that that scene again in the fire that we keep talking about, the fact that white supremacists are the bad guys in this movie, and no black people survive this movie.
They
entirety.
were efficient.
Well, the guy that worked at that intelligence agency,
the intelligence,
the big
yes,
ass
there was that
glasses,
one guy. But the entirety of the family who was the black family who was set up trying to fight this white supremacist movement, they completely got wiped out. Again,
And
hilariously.
Like it's weird because it feels like Michael Dudikoff should have been the sidekick in this other movie, because none of the they say like when you're writing, like the things should happen to your protagonist, and
none
they
just happened
near him. Like this dude's retired, taking care of his sister. Other dude's running for senator who takes justice into his own hands. Like that's like I feel like that's
because as I was watching this and I was looking at Steve James and his tuxedo and the mustache, it gave me like vibes of Hagar from Final Fight.
Yeah,
I gotta wonder if there was maybe this was an inspiration for that, because it's the same kind of look. But yeah, the fact that the entire family gets wiped out, it's pretty amazing. Because as I was watching this, I was like, oh, the kid, they're not going to kill the kid. He's just going to be like,
yeah.
And then they kill the kid, and then they're like, I'm like, they're not going to kill they're not going to kill the wife. They're just going to beat her. No, they shoot the wife.
They shoot her right in the face.
And then the boy falling down from the roof. I'm like, they're not going to kill the last kid in the family. No,
they killed him. So then that entire scene was useless. That whole thing, right, where he's climbing up the stairs. Don't worry, son. And also, here's another thing that occurred to me. He always
with an arrow in his back.
He always saves his wife first. In Mardi Gras, right? As soon as there was a gunshot, he takes his wife down to like cover her, leaving his son
completely. He picks it up like in front of him. I thought he was using the kid for cover.
He wait. He when he sees that something's going on, his first action is he tells his wife to cover, and then he goes to grab his son, and that's when he gets shot, right? But his first instinct was to his wife. Then secondly, when they're coming out of the house on fire, his wife, he's in bed with his wife, but it would have made perfect sense for him to just be like, all right, wife, follow down with Michael Dudikoff. I'm gonna go upstairs. No, he brings his wife all the way outside and then comes back into the house, which is where he had the arrow in his back. That whole sequence was for nothing because none of the motherfuckers survived. They all fucking died, right?
Yeah,
Whatever
it
you
makes no
do,
sense,
make
but
sure you save my
it's
son's
the
life.
charm and the heart that they put into the acting, right? Because they were just playing it for real.
No, it was gripping. I was captivated by that scene because I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, he's gonna save him. He's gonna sacrifice himself, but he's gonna save the son, and that's the way it's gonna go.
Although I gotta say, the Michael Dudikoff's daughter, I mean, little sister,
Sister?
and that other son. I noticed there must be something wrong with these kids. The house is burning, and all they do is sit in the bed
Sit
and
there.
scream.
Even get
No,
burned to death.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
so
deserve to be
yeah,
burned.
so that was the lesson I learned. If like your house is on fire, don't just sit in your bed
Sit
and,
there.
and whine. But
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb.
the last thing I wanted to cover was the music in the film, which was done by George S. Clinton,
Hell yeah.
who has over
Not that George Clinton.
not
Not-
the George Clinton, George S.
Not that
Clinton,
George
okay?
Clinton.
I
I had to look it up.
guy
Funkin'
who's
motherfucking-
scored over 100 movies. And interesting thing about him too, he's done everything from the Austin Powers movies to the Mortal Kombat movies.
Mm.
So, but I thought he did a good job for the kind of movie this is. Sort of these, building tension and some of these nice, fun, almost cheesy action cues. But I think it served the film well.
You know what? Once I saw the name, I had on tape. He did the music for Brain Scan, and
cool.
There we go.
I like that. I think the movie didn't have a score. I feel like it had one track, and they just played it over and over. This one, yeah, I thought the music was fine. Like it didn't. There's not like something that I was like humming after, but definitely set the tone. It had some decent synths and some action canon sounds.
I couldn't disagree with you more, Dash. Actually, for me, the music was the highlight. Or at least one of the highlights in the cinematography. I thought the synth, the use of synths, the use of odd sounding. It didn't sound like a typical score. It sounded kind of more part of the like background. In the Bayou, the score of it was like a snare drum. Like it stuck with me. I really, yeah, no, it stuck with me. Again, it was one of the things while watching it. I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So I thought his instrumentation was really good. Again, maybe it's just the nostalgic value. Whenever you hear synths like that, synth wave stuff, it always appeals to me. And then also, it just had that canon action movie soundtrack, right?
Which was the synth sound, which was like synth sounding stuff because it was cheaper, obviously, than getting some orchestra to score your movie.
And I think also that was, at the time, even music was using, they were investigating a lot more synth stuff. If you listen to the popular music of the time, it was a lot of synthy stuff. And again, everything that's old becomes new again. And, then there was like that synth wave, I think that Dash and I were talking about in a previous podcast. But for me, I think the two highlights for me were the fact that maybe three. The fact that anyone could get it. I was just saying. I messaged the group during the while I was watching the burning house scene where everybody died. That it reminded me of Game of Thrones, where it's like you never know who's gonna get it. I definitely sat there watching the movie during that scene, and I was by myself, and I kept on going, oh, I was kind of amping myself up a little bit to some degree too, because I was having fun with the movie. Shooting little one. It was just the kind of movie that you're shooting one-liners while it's going on, like to yourself. So that happened to me like 3 times where I was just like, oh, yeah, I forgot where I was going with those other two. So I'm gonna have to pass it back.
All right.
Just did that first one 2 more times.
Yeah, we'll talk about the reaction from the critical reaction. So when this film came out, so it got from what I've seen, there's not a lot of reviews online that I was able to find, but it got negative to mixed reviews. And Nina Darnton of the New York Times wrote, "The heroes themselves, the movie tirelessly points out, are kind men with strict codes of honor and intense personalities. The enemy is unambiguously bad. These kinds of movies are not strong on subtlety." Again, no shit.
That's the point. I didn't sign up for
meant to be
this.
Subtle.
Isn't Sense and Sensibility.
Exactly. So I'm always baffled by these types of reviews for a movie like this. And then the
John
Washington
Eagle
Post.
is a very complicated man.
Yes, exactly.
He's torn.
Matt Hunter, right? Yeah. So the Washington Post said that they also noted a perceived lack of subtlety in the movie, and wrote that its action sequences are orchestrated by director Sam, in parentheses, Dr. Ninja Furstenberg, with his usual panache. So I guess damning with faint praise. But
Yeah.
wanted to hear what the people had to say. So I looked at the lowest rated IMDb review and the highest rated one. So let's start with the lowest rated one. This reviewer gives it a 1 out of 10. Mhorg 201811. Title says, still waiting for IMDb to have a 0 rating.
Yikes.
So it says, this absolute crud fest starring the stone-faced Michael Dudikoff, who they should have switched roles with Steve James, letting Stoneface
familiar.
get whacked, is one of the worst canon films ever. Now, I'm not going to say canon movies are great, but some of them are fun. This one isn't. It's boring. The action is terrible. The story is lame. They kill off the better actor and fighter in Steve James, allowing Dudikoff, who can't act or fight or fake kung fu at all, fight an equally bunch of inept white racist losers who dress like rejects from an Italian ripoff of Mad Max. A truly pathetic waste of time, money, and effort. I wish I could inject bleach into the brain cells that retain the memory of this trash so I can forget it. Totally worth it.
Can I just say that with the exception of with him saying, "Oh, it's a waste of time," there's nothing that he wrote in there that I disagree with, except for I enjoyed it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, all the things he's putting as negatives is what made me enjoy the movie so much.
Yeah, I think sometimes people like this just don't understand how to enjoy this type of movie. You know, these are acquired tastes.
Yeah.
And okay, let's look at a more positive. Okay, so this was a 10 out of 10 from Hellraiser 76, and title is Hunter Avenger. This film is another of my favorite. Okay, I'm reading it as he wrote. This film is another of my favorite action films, and it's also like any hard, elusive game slipped under the radar. It's also another favorite in the dangerous game action subgenre. But also, this is also my favorite Michael Dudikoff film. If you can believe that I really like that if you can believe that I really like that action star, whom I think is an underrated action star. So if you have dyslexia, this movie's you might find this movie awesome. Yeah.
Of my favorite, like out of all action movies, like this one's like, give me 10 DVDs that you feel I need to see. He's like, Avenging Force.
Yeah, well, sometimes you can just never know if people are being sincere or sarcastic. I think that's probably somewhat sincere, but I question the lucidness of the reviewer. All right, so yeah, but it has like a 5.8 on IMDb, which I don't know if that's decent or not, but it's higher rated than American Ninja, Carlos. So
really,
surprising.
I gotta go back and watch those now because again, I'm really scared that they don't hold up.
So
yeah, that might be another. That's a good idea for.
Yeah, so the movie is on home video on Blu-ray through 88 Films, which I think is a UK label, and it's also free on Tubi. And it's also uploaded, I think, a couple of times on YouTube in a pretty good quality.
That's another thing I wanted to say is it looks like this movie was either remastered or just preserved very well because the Tubi version looked really good. The colors were vibrant. There wasn't very many scratches. It looked clean. So I'm not sure if it was remastered or restored or if it was just well preserved. But I was really impressed by how good it looked.
Okay. Well, so let's wind things down. Dash, favorite scene or part in the film?
Hands down, the entire burning house. So we got a text from Carlos that was anybody can get it, and this was, you know, obviously I just assumed someone or anyone can die during this movie. When I watched it, I thought he was referring to the Mardi Gras scene, which is the first kid dying. And I was like, oh shit, he's totally right. And I get to this, this fire scene where everything that I thought for the previous movie was completely just enhanced and just elevated. We have main characters dying, children getting shot, wives getting shot, guards blowing up. We get the
grandpa.
Grandpa
Yeah.
dying. We get the
Yes.
star getting an arrow who pulls it out for in the weirdest way possible. I feel like if I only saw one scene from this movie, I'd want
That's the
this
one.
to be it. And it got crazier and crazier
Yeah.
with like just expecting like, okay, he's gonna wake up this kid, everyone's gonna get out.
Mhm.
Wrong. That did not happen. This was the scene that had me on the edge of my seat, and it's easily my favorite.
Yeah,
The
and
thing is,
Carlos, before you answer, I just want to jump in because I think because they went crazy in terms of like the people they were killing off. That's why I guess I felt let down by the ending because it really is not. You don't feel like these guys get their come up as for killing his best friend's entire fucking family. You know, his
Grandpa.
grandfather. You know, and
All those
kidnapping
cops,
his sister. So
blew up his ranch.
yeah.
Yeah.
they had
I,
like
I would
7 guards that were just like pacing around the front
doing
and
nothing.
like
Not
gone.
really looking. Like,
Yeah.
they weren't hiding that
Yeah.
hard. They
Yeah,
were
they were eating
literally like
soup. Come
15
on.
feet, 15 feet from the thing. Like, oh, these 4 guys with these crazy masks on, and these like trained guards didn't think to like look at the bush where somebody
Yeah.
might hide. To your point, also, if there was one scene that you could see in this movie dash, and it was this one, that would be great. But I feel like that would set you up for a completely different movie than this was, and you
Yeah,
might be
oh,
disappointed
100%,
with
yeah.
the actual movie if you did. Like,
Yeah.
you'd be bad. So in terms of favorite scene, again, I think it's the same scene. It's got to be right. Like the craziness that happened in that scene with all the people dying um, was great. What I want to go in the other direction, and I want to say what my least favorite scene was when they were in the bayou before getting to the bayou when they were at that party thing going on
You mean
Yeah,
the Larry the
yeah.
Cable Guy
and the
cosplay party?
yeah, and it looked like they had some kind of sex trafficking thing going on. The whole scene just made me uncomfortable from the time that he jumps in the water, kind of jumps up, gets in there, and then all of a sudden you were saying his clothes are dry when he got out of the water, and they're playing, I guess it's like bluegrass music or something, or it's their version of it. It just all felt very dirty. I felt like almost dirty watching it. So I want to give a shout out to that scene, and also the actress who played the madam slash Mister of that house.
Fifi.
Something about was that his name?
Yes, yeah. So in the I think they're thrown into the water and the caption was like Fifi no, and I was like, it's an odd name. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So that was my least favorite scene, and again to switch up a little bit since I had the same favorite scene as Anthony.
You know one thing about that scene which I thought was weird? I wasn't sure what the rules were, right? Because he gets his sister and he's trying to leave, but they keep
But they
pointing
won't let him.
shotguns for him to leave. But so like was the goal like, okay, allow him to get in here because he was invited. They're like, hey, come
Yeah.
here and your sister will be
Yeah.
here. So he has to sneak in, which why?
Why?
Because then once he's there, they all know he's there. But then he's like, okay, I'm gonna leave. And they're like, was the plan like, no, he can only leave through the swamp.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and they're also saying like once it rains, the alligators come out.
Alligators come, which
So
didn't see a single
Was
alligator.
the goal like if you're trying to kill this person because they were already invested that they wanted to test themselves against him?
Mm-hmm.
So here, go into this swamp where you could die by alligator. I don't know. It was just a little
Yeah,
strange.
that whole plot point was very half baked, which was again surprising because I don't know if the writer of Hard Target saw this and said, "Well, that should be the thing that's dialed up," because there's 2 great movies within Avenging Force that don't get realized, which is the Pentangle aspect of it and then the Most Dangerous Game part of it. But for me, I had 2 favorite scenes. I loved like John P. Ryan. I think I love him as an actor. His monologue in that scene that kind of sets up the Pentangle, I thought was
Excellent.
amazing.
Excellent.
And Carlos, I'm
Excellent.
gonna disagree with you. I really like that scene when he goes to that whatever that place is. With
You did like it.
it's just so off kilter when he's walking through that, and there's you don't know what's going on, why they're there, what they're doing, and what the rules are, right? Of what's going on in terms of it's just people standing around doing weird things and not even acknowledging him. It sort of felt very surreal. And then the cross dresser and the garter belt and everything like that. So I just found it. I mean, it doesn't really fit into the movie, but
Yeah,
I
it
just
felt
thought it was
off-putting
it
kind
just
of.
offered an interesting vibe, which I thought was interesting. Okay, and then so let's get to it then. Let's hear what our ratings are for this for Avenging Force.
Sure. I mean, I went in blind. This wasn't my favorite like canon film or low budget film. I think for the reasons that we talked about, while some stuff was really fun, the pacing of it, like it didn't escalate. Like I feel like half hour in and then even 45 minutes in when we get to my favorite scene, the burning house, it kind of just got to slow down. It got much slower. There wasn't anyone really for Michael Dudikoff to play off of anymore, so like all of the like relationship parts were done, a lot of the like endless waves of henchmen were done, and then we're just in the bayou and in this house where it's padded. For an hour and a half movie, maybe I would be a lot more forgiving, but for getting closer to the 2 hour range, I think like a lot of the fun left midway through the movie. But I did have a lot of fun watching it. But because of that, like I think it probably would have only plateaued to like a 3 out of 5 even at its best with those. But because of the pacing, I'm gonna have to drop this down to 2 pentangles out of 5.
All right, Carlos.
Also, just want to give a quick shout out to the scene where they had to fight at the final fight, and he's like, "Oh, come to the Great Hall," which was more like a hallway, and, and he grabs this thing with the I forget what they call it, Morning Star, I think is what it's called. It's like the thing with the
Mace?
ball and the spikes,
Yeah.
a mace. And for some reason, he gets it and just breaks the glass next to him. For some reason, like I thought he was gonna like pull another weapon out. No, he just wanted to panache, just
What
for
did
like
you
a
what
little
did
bit
you
of flair.
what did you think in that scene, how he excuses himself from dinner and like
I'll
no
be
one
back.
checks on him? No,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
No
He's
one hears it.
screaming.
No one hears
The
what's
shit
going on
breaking.
in the house.
He had the most anemic little kitty too.
yeah,
That
that
was
was
a, but
that
that
was
guy was good. That guy was good. So for me, I had issues with this movie, and I think that a lot of the fun I had with this movie, I created just because I was the one being loud and obnoxious, like, "Oh shit, yeah, oh, get him!" Just and so I had a lot of fun with it. I think that the movie gets 2 arrows to the knee. However, watching it with me because of my own fun, I elevated it to a 2.5
so the
Mm.
Carlos
arrows to the
drift
knee.
tracks is like
Yeah,
added.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So 2.5, 2.5 to
So
the
so
to
for
the knee.
me, objectively, this is not a good movie, but it was entertaining. I thought just from a story standpoint, there are some really interesting ideas in this film that were realized, I think, in the Purge and also in maybe Hard Target. That this it did whatever reason this wasn't those ideas were not brought to the forefront. But I think the performances are decent for what this is. Things move at a decent pace, although some scenes, like I thought the shipyard scene was really stretched out. Like some of the action scenes are really kind of too long. Even the Mardi Gras thing I felt was getting a bit too long. But I think on the strength of some of the interesting ideas and the story, I'll give it 2.5 gimp masks out of 5.
Mm. All right, pretty aligned on this one.
Yeah, I think we're
Yeah.
pretty
So
all.
I
I
feel
yeah,
mean,
like
I think that
if we
makes
watched
sense.
this together, this would have been like a 4 out of 5.
Exactly,
easily.
yeah,
exactly.
yelling at the TV. Yeah.
Throwing popcorn at the screen.
Yeah. This is like our version of The Room.
All right. Well, that brings us to Dash, and you're the one that's picking next week's film.
So I was on the fence about this was potentially going to be my last pick instead of Time Cop, but I watched this movie and I really want to talk about it with you guys, and that's the whole point of this podcast. So my pick is going to be She Shoots Straight, directed by Corey Yoon. This movie is available on Haya, the streaming service for action movies. A lot of Asian action movies. I think there's a week-long trial, but they have a pretty good library, so definitely worth checking out their library and seeing if that's something that's interesting to you. But this is Hong Kong cinema. Girls with Guns is the genre, and name of the movie is She Shoots Straight. So excited to talk about that with you on the next episode of Shoot Punch.
So did you said you've seen this already?
I have.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I tell you, I haven't seen it.
I might have. I'm not sure if I've seen it. I might have seen it already. I just maybe don't remember the name or don't remember the film. But yeah, look forward to checking it out. I see like Sammo, good old Sammo Hung is the star. So
yeah, you'll see some familiar faces, and Corey Yoon ability to direct action sequences. Definitely curious to hear what you both
all right, we're going international for the next episode.
I gotta imagine too that we're about to see some, especially after the choreography that was in this movie, like how it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like I think it's gonna be a stark contrast in the choreography.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you to the both of you and to our faithful viewers. At this point, 40 of you. So
listeners,
thanks for tuning in to another episode of Shoot Punch Kick. Please leave a comment and subscribe and share, and we'll see you. Yeah, and and do all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and if you don't like it, just click the thumbs down button twice. All right, so we'll see you guys next time.
But goddamn.